What is a seemingly harmless parenting mistake that will majorly fudge up a child later in life? Story 1. Not following through with your promises. If you told your child you were buying ice cream tomorrow in the hopes that they'd forget, and the next day when they ask, you tell them no, they'll see you as unreliable. Ice cream is just the first thing that came to my mind. I'm sure someone else can explain better what I'm trying to say here without sounding so ridiculous. I taught my children at very young ages that outside of extreme circumstances, failing to keep a promise made is the same as telling a lie. Therefore, I won't make promises to them that I am not absolutely certain I can keep. They learned early in life that I take my promises very seriously and will go to great lengths to honor them. We have hit very hard times recently, and I have had to delay delivery on some promises, which breaks my heart. But they know that I will fulfill those promises eventually, and are much more empathetic and understanding than their peers have been in similar situations. Story 2. Using them as props for jokes in public. Glad you got a kick out of it, Dad. My dad challenged me to a drinking contest in front of his friends when I was 16. I'm a tiny petite girl, and because I always wanted to impress him and make him proud, I agreed. He made me drink Jaeger bombs until I threw up, and took a photo of my face in the bowl. Then, he texted it to all of his mates. They were also my work colleagues at the time. Oh, and the first time he ever introduced me to alcohol at 14 years of age, he made me do shots of Sambuca, shot for shot with him, for some quality time with Dad. Mom had to take me to the bathroom to be sick and put me to bed. Story 3. Giving in to your kids' wants and desires, without upholding discipline and consequences. This will give your kids a large uphill battle to climb later. I say this because my parents babied me a lot when I was young. I never had to do anything I didn't want to do. When I started getting bad grades because I wasn't doing my homework, my parents would have conferences with my teachers so they could give me extra credit. I had a rude awakening in college when I realized how hard life is. I 100% love and adore my parents. And who's to say if they did discipline me more that I'd have turned out any different? Probably not, but you never know. But when I have kids, I already know a few things I'd do differently. Story 4. Never saying sorry to your kids. My mom only just recently started telling me sorry when she gets worked up. It has built up such a resentment for her over the years. And I also have trouble saying sorry myself because of it. Tell your kids sorry, especially if you overreact to something they did. My mom and dad are like this. But the way they do it is strange. They'll apologize for little things, like stepping on my toes or losing something of mine. Stuff like that, they'll try to make it right. But when it comes to the big things, like admitting they were wrong or that they hurt me or said awful things, they'll do anything instead of saying sorry. They'll even act like they never did it in the first place. The only way I've found for them to stop doing even a single one of the big things is to not contact them, block them from social media, and let them think I've fallen off the face of the earth before they finally get desperate enough to say any kind of apology and behave decently for a while. Until the next incident. Story 5. Being a helicopter parent. My parents were helicopter parents. I was not allowed to lock my bedroom door. My mom listened in on my phone calls, this was in landline phone days, and went through my personal belongings when I wasn't home, including reading the notes that friends and I passed in school. I wasn't allowed to talk to boys or date because I'm a girl. Doing this only prevents your children from learning how to form healthy relationships. You should teach your children how to do things, such as date, in a safe and responsible manner, rather than ban it. It also teaches kids to hide things from people and not trust others with anything. Story 6. Saying I don't care who started it. I grew up with friends whose siblings would target the one with the bad temper, provoke them into a rage, then cry and play victim when they got slapped. In this case, it does matter who started it. A parent has to make it clear that violence isn't okay, but neither is provoking someone into said violence. It doesn't matter that said person never hit or kicked while their sibling did. They never would have gotten hurt in the first place if they didn't encourage the aggression to begin with. Children are clever and will find loopholes in their parents' rules. Parents need to be better and snuff out that kind of BS when it starts. If they don't, they'll raise a manipulator and a scapegoat. One will use them and one will resent them. It's a lose-lose all because of a simple rule. Story 7. Not creating a safe space for your kids to tell their secrets and make mistakes. When I was younger, I excitedly confided in my mom about my first boyfriend. But instead of calmly talking me through this, she immediately brought my dad in the conversation and they both yelled at me and forced me to break up with him. My parents sat me down at the kitchen table and forced me to write a letter to my boyfriend to tell him that I didn't want to see him anymore. I cried the entire time. After I was done, they posted pictures of the letter all over Facebook and acted like it was so cute. Story 8. Not stopping when your child says, stop. Whether it's teasing, or tickling, or resting. Kids who have parents that don't respect their boundaries always seem to end up being the biggest dicks and bullies because they've learned they don't have to respect other people's feelings. My dad would squeeze my knee to tickle me, but it would quickly turn painful and he wouldn't stop until I cried. I would beg him to stop, but he wouldn't until it got to that point. That's not tickling. My dad is still doing that to me. I'm 24. Story 9. Don't smother your kids. My mom quit having her own life the moment my brother and I were born. She was an incredibly devoted and loving mother and was very kind to us. But when we were born, she stopped having friends, did not work, and was home every single day from when I was born to when I moved out in my early 20s. She was very easy to upset because she had no other source of self-esteem, and any time I screwed up, and I screwed up a lot, it was as if I had levied a very personal attack against her. In the last 5 years or so before I left, I don't think we had a single conversation that didn't drive her to tears, and I promise I wasn't that bad. I constantly felt cornered and stressed and fell into depression as a defense mechanism. She took my resulting lack of performance very personally, creating a very treacherous cycle that was only broken when I enlisted and finally got away. To this day, I often feel like I'm a bad person who failed to live up to her love. Story 10. Giving cruel punishments. I grew up in a very strict Asian household. My parents were very strict on the never wake us up policy. To this day, I get very anxious and refuse to wake people up, in fear of being yelled at and locked in a closet. Jesus. Locking kids in a closet is cruelty. I'm also Asian and I can corroborate. My parents and that dude in the comment above's parents were using the same notes, because I ended up locked up in a closet too. And let me tell you, from the perspective of the child, that experience is very scary. It's quite terrifying, and on top of that, you as a kid are aware of your small size and helplessness. So by forcing something like being placed somewhere you can't escape from, it triggers an instant panic response that I don't think grown-ups understand. The magnitude of that response and its impact on the psyche. From the perspective of these parents, the child is merely upset by the punishment. That is where they have gone horribly wrong. It shows that they lack the capacity to empathize with the thoughts and feelings of a child. Edit, this thing is getting a bit more attention than I thought. I wanted to be a little more detailed into what happened because just calling it locked in the closet isn't really close to painting an accurate description. I've had my hands and feet tied on a child-sized wicker chair and I was gagged, then placed in an empty bedroom while my folks pretended to leave the apartment. Whatever shock value this disciplinary action meant to convey, all I got out of it was to not trust them anymore. The happy family facade seemed to be just that to me from then on, a facade and a sham set up for the benefit of the people watching us. Internally, I knew I would one day become an adult and I'd be able to be on my own, away from this family, and I always waited for that phase in my life where I'd be free and independent. Story 11. Not having them do chores. My parents pushed me to be academic, so waited on me hand and foot as a kid to make more room for study. When you're too young and stupid to know any better, you think it's a blessing. When I moved out to college, I didn't really know how to clean, when to clean, what to clean with, how to wash clothes, how to get them dry, etc. The only thing I could do is cook and binge drink. That's no way to bring up a kid, and it's a steep learning curve doing all that stuff for the first time in your early 20s. It sounds like a super lame answer, but make sure every kid does their fair share of chores. Story 12. Telling your child that whatever activity that they enjoy doing is annoying or dumb. I used to love to sing. I was in chorus and would play my favorite songs over and over to learn the words. Not only did my sisters tease me for it, but my parents told me to shut up constantly. So, I stopped singing. I must have been terrible, right? Now I only sing when I'm alone, or jokingly with some friends. What really broke me was when I went to visit everyone for the holidays and my sister said that she was surprised I never pursued singing, since I seemed to love it so much when I was younger. I nearly started crying and had to bite my tongue so I wouldn't scream at her for being one of the reasons I stopped. It's always funny for the ones doing the teasing. But it actually hurts the ones being teased. Especially when it's coming from people who are supposed to love you. Story 13. Mocking them or laughing at them. Adults do it to each other all the time, but kids who haven't been immersed in the background cruelty of our culture for years don't understand that it's just the language of the land, and not that they themselves are particularly unworthy of respect. I got laughed at and mocked a few times as a kid, and that shit hurts a lot. There was one time I was trying to help a friend at their birthday by taking their presents to them. But all the adults and my parents thought I was being selfish and wanted all the presents for myself. They joked and laughed at me, never allowing me to explain my intention. I think that hurt my self-esteem a lot in the long run. Story 14. Lying to your child. When I was 4, my parents adopted a kitten. Of course, I had never seen anything quite so delightful before, and I could barely keep my hands off the little fur ball. So about 2 or 3 days passed. I get up in the morning and walk out and ask, "Where's the kitten?" And my parents told me that he died, implying that my roughhousing had killed it. I was terrified to touch an animal for several years thereafter. In fact, they had simply given the kitten back to the people they got it from. Story 15. Letting pride get in the way. If you qualify for food stamps, take the freaking food stamps. Do not make your kid live on macaroni and cheese made with water, because we don't take handouts. Pride can be such a dangerous thing. The health, safety, and well-being of your children should trump anyone's pride.